Hello, welcome to the Talking City podcast coming to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, joined by Simon Bajkowski. Happy New Year. We're recording this on New Year's Eve and a New Year miracle. Manchester City have won a game of football. It came at Leicester, who looked like they're in for quite a long relegation battle, but City did what they had to do and got the win. A first goal for Savinho, Erling Haaland back in the goals. A player that we've not really heard of, James McAtee, came off the bench and changed the game for City. We'll talk all about that. Si, did you think this day would come that City would win a game of football?
You're so negative, Joe. You're so negative. I
It's
spend
the
these
end of the
podcasts
year.
trying to be upbeat about Manchester City, and you bring it down all the time. It was a very welcome 3 points and another pretty miserable performance. So, City ending the year with 3 points and lots of work to do to get to where they want to be, or close to where they want to be.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of this. That it wasn't a good performance. It wasn't great, and I think the possession for Leicester was quite high. But City aren't in a position to be going straight in and dominating games at the moment. It felt to me like they just had to get in there and get the win and do what they had to do. And I think they did that. I'm not too sure it was the worst performance. I know Pep came out and said they played better against Everton, and maybe they did, but they are literally in a position where they had to just do what they could to end the run. And if that meant going to a team like Leicester and playing like they did, I think they deserve a bit more credit for doing that. I don't know. I think as much as that negative word has started this podcast, there maybe has been a bit of negativity. So if they do win and do a job, give them a bit of credit at the same time.
Well, now it's back to me being negative. I think it depends on the opponents and the results. I think and also ending the run. It's not ending the run really, because sort of a win over Forest didn't end the run. It just stood out as one win out of 13 rather than 0 wins out of 13. So I've no confidence based on the Leicester performance that City will now win more games than they lose. Leicester were the worst team I've seen in this division this year, and a very close second were Man United, who somehow managed to win the derby and have shown over the past month that is one of City's low points this season, losing to that United team, because oh my word, are they bad. But yeah, Leicester were the worst team I've seen, and they nearly caused, they nearly got a point. If they'd scored, maybe they could have gone on to win it, and City won. So it's irrelevant. But I think had City dropped points against a team right in the relegation zone, I think it would have been the lowest point, and they didn't. So that is a positive. But the performance wasn't enough, I don't think, to think that any corners have been turned, and I think Pep is still at a loss as to how to improve things, really.
Yeah, I would agree that let's not jump to too many conclusions, because they need to back it up against West Ham and then Brentford, and then moving forward in the following fixtures. It's a case of you can't just rely on one result. It's got to be 2, 3, 4, 5. But I don't know. I came away from that game thinking City have done all right here, and then I feel like all the things in the last couple of days have been, they're still rubbish. And yeah, they didn't play the best. It wasn't a performance of a team who are going to win a title, but also it was a team who are still suffering from a lot of injuries and just did enough to win a game. And that's sometimes what you've got to do when you're struggling. And yes, if Jamie Vardy could have stayed on side or finished from 6 yards, it could have been a different game. But City had the chances as well, and could have scored a few more. So I think I'm tending to look a bit more favourably on the performance, but it's hard to do that. I do appreciate with 13 very, very bad performances in the bank, and also the teams that City haven't beaten haven't been on good runs either. So that sort of adds to the discontent, and like you say, United are staring at a Manchester derby with Stockport next season rather than City, and Tottenham are in disarray, and they beat City twice, and all of these teams. Ironically, the only team City have beat is Nottingham Forest, who are playing brilliantly at the moment, and a second in the league. So it's just been a very, very weird run. But I think you saw the scenes at full time. Guardiola sends all his players over. They're all giving the shirts to the fans, and there's smiles on the faces. I think it was such a relief just to get 3 points, no matter how it came.
Yeah, I mean the away end were one of the best away ends I think all year. For 2024, they were thoroughly loud and enjoyed it throughout. Kind of Leicester were pretty much silent throughout, and that kind of, rather than sort of dissuading City fans, just sort of spurred them on even more. So they were really, really good, and it was a positive afternoon for the team. It was a positive day for them. But they really need to work on the things that are letting them down, and they have got loads of injuries. Yeah, they did have a few players return, and they, it was really interesting. Guardiola said afterwards, that they had a good 11 against Leicester, but they had a good 11 against Everton and a good 11 against Villa, but they didn't win because it's all in their heads. And this is a guy who has been able to motivate his players and find new ways to motivate them when everyone thought the race would be run. And he is really struggling to find a way to pick this team up off the floor or up off the hole that they've dug themselves into. And you mentioned those teams that have had really terrible runs around playing City. It kind of used to be the other way around. Teams would have very good runs around playing City, but City would be the one game they'd lose. So that is kind of what City need to pick back up. But it's very difficult to say. It's been hard to find positives because, things have been so temporary. Like Foden plays good for 2 games and you think a corner is being turned, and then, he wasn't great at Leicester again and it goes back again. That there's just so little to hang on to. There are a few things at Leicester that could turn into something more positive, but we're just going to have to wait and see. West Ham on Saturday, after a pretty much a full week without a game, should be an opportunity for City to be better. And if they are better when they play West Ham, then the next podcast will be more positive, I think.
Well, let's try and make this one a bit more positive. We've both been negative in our own ways in the first 5-10 minutes of this one. Savinho got his first goal. I think before the game, there's a bit of attention on him. I think it was 27 shots in the Premier League without scoring. A few assists. We spent the last podcast talking about what he offers. He won the penalty against Leicester, but it felt like quite a lot of the time he cuts inside. He does 90% of the work, and then the 10% lets him down. Starts against Leicester and he dribbles inside 2, sidesteps a couple more, and you think, right, he's going to put a cross in. This is brilliant, and he runs it out of play, and the Leicester fans are jeering him. And that felt like it summed up his City career. He does everything right until the last minute, and then he pops up. He's in the right place and he scores, as Kevin De Bruyne described it, a tap-in. But it was a tap-in into the top corner, which was well pounced upon, I thought. He gets an assist in the second half. It's a good way for him to sort of end the first half of his first season at City, especially after, we were talking last week about that he needs to do more, and he's got this record coming from La Liga that suggests that fans should be wanting more from him. Hopefully this should be the goal that gives him that confidence.
Yeah, it was, again, Pep was quite unintentionally damning of him after the game. He said, and I will quote, He make one action fine, second action fine, the third miss it, the fourth a mistake, the fifth mistake, sits, try again and try again and try again until the end he tries. And he does try again. But in there have been kind of mistakes at crucial times, and he's not been able to put everything together all in the right order. Yeah, it may have been an easy goal in the sense that the keeper spilled it quite close to the goal, but he was still following it in. He made the right decision to go in, to gamble. That's a forward's instinct. And also, Guardiola was more than the goal. I think he was happy with the assist for Haaland. Like, it's a really good cross. It's a cross that De Bruyne would play. It's a cross that Mahrez would play. And it meant that Erling Haaland got some service and got a ball into the box that he could get his head on and get into the back of the net, which the wingers in particular have not been able to do this season, which is why, it was perfect, really, because Savinho scored and made one. And that is what City need. They need people to feed Haaland, but they also need the goal-scoring burden to be off him. So yeah, he is very much a work in progress, but people you speak to about him who've sort of been very close to him in these first 5 months at City say that he's, super determined. He's got he's incredibly focused on getting better and learning. He's not the sort of spend every night out on the town. He's got a young wife with a baby on the way, and he is also been, I think Kevin said, did he sort of like been dragged down a bit by the state of the team? It's not easy to play in a struggling team, and especially when you're a winger and you get the ball and you can dribble, but then people expect you to finish off that move. And it's been tricky. I don't think people have got doubts about him. So hopefully he can take the confidence from the goal, because it was nice with everyone over to celebrate with him as well. That unity in the dressing room is still very much visible on the pitch. So hopefully he can kick on from that.
And straight away we heard the fans singing his name and trying to fit Savinho into various different chants as the game went on. It hit me as I'd sort of got home from the game that I'd recorded a video of the warm-up. So, they're doing this new warm-up where the ball starts in the middle and then it sometimes goes to the wingers on the inside of the area, or the sort of attacking midfielders or whatever, and then they'll either shoot or put a ball in for Haaland, or one of the fullbacks will go in, and they're trying to recreate these attacking moves. We've not really seen any of that in practice in games. There was one bit that I caught on video that was exactly what happened, which was De Bruyne passing it out to Savinho, cutting back on his right, clipping it in for Haaland and heading back in the bottom corner. Now, there weren't any defenders there, but it must have been satisfying for them to just, it was a move straight off the training ground, in the sense that it starts with McAtee making space and then everyone just clicked into action, and it just felt like they were back into the rhythm because they had a bit of space and knew exactly what to do. So it was a goal that I think will be quite satisfying for City to have got right. And we've been saying for a while, get more balls into Haaland and he'll get more goals. It's up to the wingers to do that. It's up to the midfielders to find the wingers, and it's up to the players at number 6 and number 8 to find the midfielders. It's a team thing to get the ball to Haaland, and when he's like that, he's not going to miss. I think that was his second goal for Haaland in 8, maybe. So it's a good one for him to get as well. He was clearly delighted with it. The fans are singing his name after the goal. Then they sing McAtee's name. He's come on. It just felt like it was like you say, the unity in the squad and the stands after those goals. It was quite a therapeutic game for players who had a point to prove, made that point. And if it took a struggling team like Leicester to allow them to do that, then it was probably a good time for that to happen.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think it is good, like you say, that something's happened we've seen it for a few weeks now, these training drills, and putting it into practice in a game is what you always want to see. And it's, in a funny way, sort of the pre-match warm-up has become an important part of trying things out, because there's so little time on the training ground between games with recovery and everything, normally when there's 2 games a week. So things like that are also positive, and Haaland did seem happier. Pep sort of unintentionally breaking the news that he's now a dad, with his partner giving birth in the last week or so. So it's been a while. It's been a slog for Haaland because he's been fit forever, and he's played every single game. I think he's through 2,500 minutes now for City in all comps, which he didn't do until like late February last season. So he's really put the miles in, but he's not had very many rewards at all. And it was good for him, and also you saw him sort of like pushing Pep towards the away fans at the end of the game. And I think Haaland has been kind of one of the underrated positives of City this year, just in the sense that like it's the end of 2024, it's coming into 2025, and he just feels like part of the furniture, and he feels like completely committed to City. And I don't think many people, certainly in Munich or Barcelona or Madrid, thought that would be the case 2.5 years into his City career, that he was he felt sort of this much a part of this City team. And he's struggled recently, but he's had struggles before, and he's shown that he can get back to his best. So I think City will certainly be hoping as well that he can pick himself up and start finding the net a bit more regularly in the new year. But what a treat it is to have him like he is. And Pep was asked recently if he was considering a false 9 without him, and I think the laugh that he came back with said it all, really.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact comments that he said, but Haaland isn't just talking about the run of form and his own form from a sort of singular perspective. He's talking about the bigger picture with City and the sort of demands of the club, and it does add into that feeling as well. The answers he's giving are of a collective mindset, not just what he thinks himself. And it's easy to read into these things, and you look at the Instagram posts and do these players write them themselves, but he's saying the right things, and he clearly cares 100% about what this team does and how well they're doing, and he wants to get them out. And when he says that it's up to him to fire them out of trouble, then you get the sense that he really truly believes that, and isn't in the mood for blaming other players. And I mean, if he has become a dad, it maybe puts the Everton game into a bit of context, because that's it's not a time when football is necessarily top of your mind in your priorities at that time. So I'd imagine getting that goal at Leicester will have been a massive moment for him, and he will hope to kick on now. We mentioned that goal sparked by a lovely turn and move from James McAtee. Little bit of a surprise to see him come on so early in the game on, 67 minutes. And that is only because he's only come on twice in the Premier League before that, both on 90 minutes. Go into this game and we're hearing a lot of reports that he might want to leave. There are various clubs interested. There's a bit of sort of discontent among the fans of why he's not playing. Guardiola's given his reasons, which is he wants to trust the older players. But at the same time, you're in a situation for 13, 14 games, you've got 0 players, and you've got someone who's been on the bench every single game and you're not using him. It was a massive thing for the fans to see McAtee come on. Within 8 minutes, he's setting up a goal. Fans are cheering his name. He plays quite well after that as well. It felt like a bit of a turning point potentially in his season. And you would expect, at least in the next one of the 2 weekends he will get some more minutes as well. So it was a good moment for him, but also a sort of a reminder of why weren't you playing him before?
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about positives, and that was probably the biggest positive, in the sense that James McAtee could be playing elsewhere in the Premier League right now, in another league. He's had 2 years with Sheffield United in the Championship and then in the Premier League, where he's come on as a player, and he could be playing elsewhere, but he chose to stay at City this season. He said, "I'm not as bothered about minutes. I want to make it at City. This is his last chance. This is his boyhood club. Last chance, really, effectively, to make it at his boyhood club." And he's had a whole season where the manager's complained about injuries and not being able to select anyone, and yet hasn't picked him. And he is different than the rest of the academies. He's different from Nico O'Reilly because he's 22. He's England under 21 international. He's played 2 years of football in the Championship and the Premier League. It's a hard league. So he's a youngster, but it's unfair to call him like a young player and categorize him with the rest of them. So you can understand why, the January window's coming up and there is frustration with him and those around him at the fact he's just not been turned to. Like, a tiny bit of mitigation is that his best position is the same as Foden and De Bruyne, and City have spent all season trying to get Foden and De Bruyne to produce their best, and it's always the temptation. Like, the temptation is to play the senior players, but also it's like, if Foden or De Bruyne get anywhere near their best, they can win us this game. You can't have the same guarantee with McAtee, and also you play him on the right wing where he came on at Leicester, but Bernardo Silva has kind of been chief firefighter. I'm going to play 4 positions every game and mop everything up. So I think Pep should have used him more, but I can see why he hasn't, even if I don't agree with it. But for McAtee to come on with all this in his head, be picked as the first sub, which is, mind-blowing in itself. He'd only previously come on in the Premier League this season in the 89th minute for 2 games. So he gets picked to come on with the game live. And he produces a moment which has the away end singing his name, and he's now flavour of the month. And you would have thought he would have started against Salford anyway in the FA Cup in a few weeks, but now you're thinking, well, he's surely won his minutes, to borrow a phrase from the manager, for West Ham as well. I don't know if he'll start, but you would expect 30 minutes or 25 to 30 off the bench at least, based on the fact that he's helped them win a game that they were looking like they could draw or lose.
I think we asked Kevin De Bruyne about that after the game, and he said hopefully he's given the manager the confidence to play him, which I thought was a bit of an interesting turn of phrase, which is the players all know how good he is. Pep obviously knows how good he is and what he can do, but maybe it has been a confidence thing of, do I throw him on in this moment? Can he do it? He's never looked to McAtee when there's been a game to settle or fight back in. It's only ever been when they've been comfortable. He's not had the chance to do that. So it was a bit of a surprise to see him being ready so early. But I think Pep said that he'd had a vision or a thought before the game that McAtee would be the one to come on. And I mean, Guardiola does this, doesn't he? He sees a game and he has a vision of how the game's going to play out and picks players for that. And he's done that throughout his time at City, and he's been wildly successful doing that. And he's more often than not right in everything that he does. I think with Guardiola, and we were talking about this on the way back from Leicester, with McAtee, it's not necessarily that he should have been starting every single game, but you just think there's been games where with half an hour to go, they just need something different, and you have something different on the bench in McAtee. I think they're the instances where you would have liked to have seen more of him. And if he can do that, the sort of thing of that he did against Leicester, which is play himself out of trouble and spark an attack, that's not the same as producing a moment of magic 20 yards out and finding the top corner. It's just keeping the ball moving and letting the other players do their thing. I think that's what he can offer, and if he can help City through this period where they'll be looking forward now, they've got a win, they want to turn a poor run into a bit more of a consistent form. Maybe he can be the sort of spark to do that off the bench to either confirm a win or keep something going. I'm not sure he's ready to start crucial games yet, but it's up to him to show it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. In terms of transfers, there has been talk of him leaving. Pep says no. It seems like nobody will be leaving because City have no players in the first place to leave. Could you see it happening in January?
Yeah, I could. You know, it all seems happy now, but in the next 4 weeks, if he doesn't play at all, and if, you know, this talk of, oh, he's really good and he's earned his minutes doesn't transpire into Pep giving him minutes, then I think he will not want to stay. And I don't really think City can have an excuse for keeping him. Like, it's as upbeat as they are about him now. Like you say, is he going to start a big game ahead of Gundogan or Silva? Oscar Bob's coming back. Is McAtee going to be ahead of Oscar Bob, the player that Pepper's praised to the hilt while he's been injured and said he was the best player in pre-season, which he was? But you know, is that still the case? I find it hard to believe that McAtee will be ahead of Bob. I find it hard to believe that McAtee will start ahead of Gundogan or Silva in a big game. And it's those minutes. I mean, the problem with not playing him has been twofold. Like, one, the senior players haven't really offered much to say we should be playing ahead of this guy. But even if you believe that they have, like, you're saying that they need rest. So when you're losing 2-0 to Juventus with 30 minutes to go, take them off and put McAtee on, because then at least they're fit. You know, Kevin De Bruyne played awfully in the derby, and you think, well, he's played 3 games in 8 days and 90 minutes before that, and you don't need to play those minutes when the game's so obviously gone. So I would like to believe that this is the start of, you know, City have a player that they didn't need to spend any money on, and a new option for the second half of the season. And who doesn't want to see, like, you know, an academy player make it at their club, and their club being, you know, one of the best in the world. But I think it's still a live transfer situation, and as encouraging as it was to see him used off the bench, I think we need to see how he's used over the next month before him and his side can be satisfied that he's going to get what he wants and, you know, what looks like he deserves in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty key point of, again, you're not asking him to play all the sort of key minutes and carry the team through this period. But if you're complaining that your key players are having to play too much football and you can't rest them, you can, in a way. Like De Bruyne says that he played those 4 games in a row and then he suffered a bit and had a bit of a setback in terms of fitness and condition. Use McAtee, and it's not always as easy, and you've got some big games, and like you say, Juventus was a pretty tricky atmosphere, and United has its own sort of fanfare around it. But if you're losing these games and you don't think you're going to get back into it, just throw him in. He's been in a relegation battle. It's one of them where I think I will hope that it's a bit of a turning point where, like De Bruyne says, Guardiola trusts him a bit more, and we can actually just see, because once he plays football, you can see what you're dealing with, and if he reacts to it positively, then you've got a player on your hands. If he doesn't meet it, then you can say, right, listen, we've given you a go, James, but it might not work here. Look for some other clubs in January or in the summer. It's one of them where he's a clearly talented player. You just need to give him the time on the pitch to see if he will fit and make it at City. So I think, like you say, Salford in the FA Cup, they should get through that, obviously, and he will probably hope for another tie against maybe a lower league side just to get some minutes in his belt where he'll be given a chance to start, and then go from there and see. We'll take a break there and we'll come back to look ahead to January, a little bit on Kevin De Bruyne, and look back on 2024. Hello, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. With Si, we heard from Kevin De Bruyne after the game. It seems like every interview with any player with a contract expiring at the end of the season, you have to ask that player, has there been any movement? And they have to say, no, nothing yet. You'll hear it from us. And that was the case with Kevin De Bruyne. It was a quick one at the end of a sort of 3-4 minute interview as he kindly stopped at Leicester on the way out. And he just said, no, there's been no movement on a contract. Not really a surprise given what he said in the last month or so, which is he wants to make sure he's fully fit. He's had his injury problems. He wants to make sure the time's right before talking with City about a contract. But tomorrow, New Year's Day, he will be allowed to speak to other clubs about offers and what he could potentially have away from City next season. On the one hand, that's a deadline. It's a big thing, and oh my goodness, he's in the last 6 months of the contract. On the other, he's calm about it. City are calm about it. That deadline has always existed, and if they can trust anybody, it's Kevin De Bruyne. I think it's a different situation to, for example, Liverpool, where they've got 3 big players all out of contract and nobody knows really what's happening. We still don't know what's going to happen with De Bruyne, but yeah, there is a new deadline on New Year's Day, but it feels like there's news and no news when we ask De Bruyne these questions.
Yeah, and also it's less of a risk, I think, because I don't think people are still fully sold on whether keeping De Bruyne is right for next season. He says he doesn't want to have contract talks until he's back fit and playing again. He said that at the beginning of November, and we're nearly months on, and he's not fit and back near his best. So, when he is fit, he still brings these amazing things. But he's, if he was performing like Mo Salah was in the Premier League this year, then I think there would be a lot more urgency to say, sign the contract, get him done for another year. But at the minute, we're still in a phase where, De Bruyne isn't sure that it's right for him. City aren't sure that De Bruyne is right for them. And they kind of have to look beyond him and think, well, who do we want to replace Kevin De Bruyne? Whether it's this summer, whether it's next summer, whether it's 2 years' time, who might be available this summer? And even if it's the case that, they would like him for another year, if it's the case where, next 2025 is the time to buy Vidal Musiala or somebody like that, then they need to go for him. They need to go for that player to land the De Bruyne successor for a long time, rather than sort of leave it until De Bruyne is ready to leave before they make their mind. Like, nobody wants to give up on the best midfielder the Premier League has seen, but everyone still needs to be convinced that keeping him would be the right move for next year.
That was literally the question I was going to ask after you answered, but you've taken it out of my mouth. Should he stay? And a couple of responses on social media suggest maybe still wait and see and let him prove himself. And yeah, he's not really been fit for a couple of years now in terms of a solid run of games. He's always been one sort of bad movement away from another injury, and he also suggested, he still needs a few training sessions and a run of those weeks with fewer games to get back to his best. So he knows he's not back at his best, and that will be a concern. He's also not really going to get better at that. You don't think? He's 33 now. I think 30. Is that right? 34 at the start of next season. History doesn't suggest his injury record is going to get better. So I think that's why there is a sort of calmness on both sides, because everybody can see the bigger picture. So it's a strange one, because I do think if you can keep him in some capacity, that should be the priority. And just listening to him talking about McAtee and Savinho and just generally about the manager, he's quite a useful person to have to defend the players, but also speak for the manager. And he is a captain without being the official club captain in all senses of the role. And it will be a big loss away from the pitch as well as clearly on it. But how often you can get him on it, he obviously costs a lot of money because he's a brilliant player when he plays football. It's just weighing up all those things. And I think they are right to wait, because those talks, you need to go into them on both sides with as much information and as many facts as possible, rather than hoping for an injury that might never get better or this, that, and the other. So it's always interesting with these contracts, and there's a lot of key players in the Premier League out of contract next year. So it's going to be an interesting 6 months or so. January transfer window, Pep keeps saying they're looking, but let's wait and see. We know who they're not going to look for. We know that no one's really going to leave. Are we expecting much of a busy month? I know they need it, but the noises suggest on the eve of the window opening, we're not necessarily going to get that.
I think the noises are a bit of a smokescreen. I think, if City say, yes, we are heading into the January transfer window and we want to spend loads of money on players, then clubs are going to say, okay, you can spend 20 million extra than you were. City want to act in this window and they want to sign a few players. And sort of the long-term security of Guardiola's new deal means that they can set is about long-term planning. I think one of the problems is the Champions League, because the group stage goes on till January, and the end of January, so clubs will still be involved in that, and you would think they would want to sign players from clubs who are in the Champions League to be of sufficient quality. The other aspect of it is, Bruno Guimaraes, I think less so, because of his age and the money he would still command. But say Martin Zubimendi is the guy to come in for be the long-term Rodri successor. If they think they've more chance of getting him in summer than in January, is it worth another 6 months of sort of the pain of not having anyone to cover for Rodri to get Zubimendi in summer? Maybe that's a decision they make. I think I said on the last pod they need to sign a centre back this window, and I think if they sign that, Pep's talks about Stones and Akanji helping out in that Rodri role, and I think if they can just have a bit more solidity and stability at the back, then that will help the Rodri situation. But I do think they need to. That was my phone dying. I think they need to get some, more than one new face in to lift the group, to lift the whole squad, to give Guardiola something else. And I think they recognise that. It's just whether they're able to pull it off, and whether, like I say, they make these choices that maybe the summer's a better time to act or a more pragmatic time to act.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but if they do look for a centre-back, what does that centre-back look like? Is it an experienced player, sort of the Diaz or Laporte mode that they signed, or is it someone a bit younger, like maybe Gvardiol, who might come with mistakes in them, but is a long-term player? We can look at defensive midfielders and you can pull 2 or 3 names out of the hat and think these are the players they should be looking at. In centre backs, I'm not sure as many stand out. I've seen Gay linked and maybe Branthwaite, but they're not going to come cheap. I'm not sure what type of profile, apart from someone who can stay fit, that they look for. Is it a Stones replacement? Is it? I'm not sure. I'm sure they will have a clear idea what they want. I just can't picture what the best type of centre back would be.
Yeah, I think Gay and Branthwaite will both be both be of the mould they were looking for as the kind of John Stones successor or Nathan Ake's successor kind of thing. And with Stones' availability, you sort of think you have to rush that along. So I think it's quite possible that you test these clubs in January, but also sort of Palace showed with Gay with Newcastle last summer that they can be very, very stubborn about holding on to their best assets, and Everton again when United came. You also be fully convinced. I mean, less so with Gay because he's got more experience, but like, you know, City have got a very good centre back in Callum Doyle on loan at Norwich at the minute, and you know, Callum Doyle, if he doesn't make it at City, is probably going to join that list of players that Guardiola reeled off at the weekend of top players that City have helped produce and then have gone on to be big successes elsewhere. You know, I think Doyle is heading that way. So you've got a really good young centre back coming through. Obviously, got nowhere near the Premier League experience of Branthwaite or Gay, but do you know, you need to make that call. I think the other end of that is they could pay 20 to 30 million on an older player who could get them experience for 6 months and mean that you don't have to worry as much about the sort of inability to have 4 centre backs fit. And that can tide you over to the summer when you can then keep that player in the squad, but also have like you say, more information about what you need to do for the long term.
It's tricky, isn't it? Balancing the short term versus long term needs and price and everything that's going on. That's why I asked, because it's there's not a simple answer to any of this. It's easy to say City need a defensive midfielder, a centre back, a Haaland backup, but actually finding that player, like Pep says, for the next 5 years is going to be a tricky one, and that's why Cheeky Begiristan and his team are at the top of the market, because it is a difficult market to navigate. Before we go, it's the last day of 2024. It's been an interesting year. They started unbeaten until the FA Cup final. Good start to the current season. Won the Community Shield, got back for that FA Cup final. Few wins, and then it's all tailed off. The last sort of 14 games maybe sort of cloud the memory of a brilliant season and brilliant achievement before that in getting 4 in a row. It's never going to live up to 2023 and all the achievements there. But 2024 hasn't been bad at all for City, has it?
No. And I'm writing a piece on a 2024 review, and it's basically history and hangovers, because you can't forget what an amazing success City had. And also, you know, we all spoke about treble hangover. There's going to be a hangover from winning the treble. There's going to be a hangover, and no one's really mentioned it about 4 in a row. But 4 in a row was kind of in many ways bigger because nobody aims to win the treble until March or April in a season. And certainly City, in the year they won the treble, were pretty, you know, even mid-January, they were not looking like a team that were going to win anything. So they didn't really have time to get too fixated on it. It kind of popped up. Whereas last season, from October, that message is on the boot room sign saying no one's ever done 4 in a row. They spent so many months going for it. And then, you know, you kind of saw it in the FA Cup final. The performance was flat because they'd done what the biggest achievement that they wanted to achieve. And I think they've struggled with that since as well. I think the squad and Guardiola is still kind of searching for a bigger purpose. You know, Guardiola keeps talking about the biggest achievements they've had being in the past. And you sort of think, what's driving you on? What is bringing everyone together and saying, you know what, this is what is going to make us win no matter what? And I think kind of that's why they've struggled. Obviously, the injuries are the big thing that have derailed the season, but you know, they were unbeaten until late October. but the performances in kind of September, October were not great. And I think they kind of need to shake off what has been, every player needs to find something within them to fight for, and that needs to be seen collectively. And I think so far this season, it's just not quite been enough. The motivation hasn't quite been what it's been in the last few years, and that's why they're struggling on top of the injuries and the confidence and everything like that.
I suppose the logical improvement on 4 in a row is 5 in a row, but the only way to say that is just do it again. It's not new, is it? It's not a new motivation.
No, and it is new, but 4 in a row was history. No one had ever done 4 in a row, and no one's done 5 in a row. But like it's not that different doing 5 in a row compared to 4 in a row. Even the banner for the derby, you'll never win 4 in a row. It's like that is something they can hold everyone else, and they're at least 4 years away from anyone matching that. But it's probably, I don't think it'll ever be matched. So they've already kind of done it all. And the players spoke at the start of the season about everyone can improve individually. But in a league where everyone else's motivation is so high, and we've seen such improvement from sort of the middle teams in the league, I'm not sure what City have had is enough to carry them through. So I think that's where they're at. Yeah.
Let's go for a quick sort of review of moments and players and games of 2024. Your best game, Si?
I would say
3-3 at the Bernabeu.
Yeah, that was the first thought. I wanted to say that, but I figured like probably the best goals I've seen this year also from that game. So at the risk of having it all from one go, but yeah, the 3-3 at the Bernabeu was probably the best. What about you?
I think just for quality and suspense and end to end, the goals were all brilliant. It sort of flowed back and forwards. Just general quality of play. I think the derby win over United, the 3-1. Obviously, Rashford's goal was brilliant, and then again some more good goals, and City fought their way back in. I think that I mean there were some good performances at the start of the season, weren't they? But when you've got City and Real Madrid, that sort of big battle that's been built up in a stadium like the Bernabeu, I think that one.
Yeah.
Go on. If your goals are coming from that game, which one? Because I like the Bernardo one. I think the surprise of it.
Yeah, I'd say Guardiola, because it was just so unexpected, and it kind of triggered an amazing run of goals for him that really dragged City over the line. But if you're talking about dragging City over the line, I think you have to say Phil Foden's goal against Real, but also it was very special. Phil Foden's goal in the derby, but then his goal against West Ham, because it was just like, it was all built up for the final day. Everyone expected City to win, but there's always those nerves. And for Foden to smash it into the top corner after 70 seconds or whatever it was, just kind of summed up what an amazing season he'd had, and why he deserved to win all the individual awards that year.
I combined those goals into one because they were the same goal and all on incredible platforms that you wouldn't even dream of trying that. And he's done it at the Bernabeu, in the derby, and on the final day to win the Premier League. It's hard. You can't separate those three, but yeah, they're all very, very good. A worst game, surely that's got to come in the last couple of months. Maybe the FA Cup final, in terms of just the sort of the deflation of it, and City didn't turn up, and seeing United do it. But performance-wise, it feels like Tottenham or I don't know, United or whatever. It's hard to separate those as well.
Yeah, worst game. Quite possibly the most recent derby, because I just think the state of that United team and the state of that United team in the game, to lose that match was absolutely atrocious. But yeah, other than there've not been too many bad ones, I would
It
say,
might be
as you would
recency bias,
expect in a
but
team that
even Aston Villa, I know Foden got that goal at the end. They just never looked like it. From the first minute, the card open, players making mistakes. There's just no tactics there, and it's a accumulation of all the issues coming together. And they probably played worse, but I'd imagine the fans were just so demoralised after that one because there was nothing to cling on to.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, those stand out in the run, I would say, as particularly bad, because even sort of Sporting and Brighton and Spurs, even, they did have spells where they looked okay.
The Feyenoord
but
one felt bad as well, even though they didn't lose.
the Feyenoord was bad in many ways, the worst. But I think for general performance, I think United or Villa was probably the worst.
But we're staying positive, so let's go back to good things. Player of the calendar year, because it's tricky. It's a sort of a split directly between the season. Foden would have taken it by a country mile before, and now he's just not turned up this season for a variety of reasons. Similar with Rodri, maybe De Bruyne's been consistent when he's played.
Yeah, Rodri's not turned up at all this season.
What is he doing? And then
I know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure on this one. I'd potentially say Haaland because he's just been steadily consistent, even though he scores a lot of his goals at the start of the season. So didn't score many. I think he scored 38 in the calendar year, which is not bad going for any player.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. It's a bit artificial, isn't it? Over 12 months, but if you are judging it over 12 months, then Haaland has probably been the most consistent, and he's been. I do think it is amazing how available he's been this season, because he has had loads of injury concerns in the past, and he is a huge guy. So I give him credit for that, even if he's not been banging in goals every week. I'd happy to have Haaland as Player of the Year.
I'd throw in Bernardo as well, because I think he's always there, quietly 7 out of 10 most games, and City would be in a lot worse position without him. Another potential one for that, but might be a better one for a surprise package, would be Gvardiol, just for his goal scoring form. There are question marks still over his defending. But if I was looking at a surprise package and a sort of someone who I wasn't expecting to do what they've done, it would be Gvardiol, and the sort of range of his finishing and sort of how prolific he's been for a defender.
Yeah. I think the only marks against Gvardiol is that he's kind of gone backwards a bit, or seems to have, in the last few months, and his passing just hasn't really been on it. At Leicester, he was not great. Let Vardy in a few times and things like that. But his goal catalogue is astonishing, and he continues to be a real threat for City. And I think if you're talking about reasons to be cheerful for 2025, he is still one of the players that you think he could be the next big thing, sort of, not City, but in world football. So he has to be up there.
And then who needs to do better in 2025? And is that worthy of an answer for a couple of minutes at the end of a podcast, or is it a podcast of its own?
Yes, good question. I think players who I would like to do better are, the one that comes to mind is Kyle Walker, because he has been very poor this season, but he's also just got so much negativity around him. So many fans are on his back for anything he does. And I think, you know, he did captain the team to 4 in a row and is still captain, and he might not have any time left. This, you know, is looking like it could be his last season. I think it would be nice if he kind of recovered a bit of form in the second half of the season that meant he wasn't leaving the club with everyone thinking such negative things about him. I think it would be nice if he sort of had a little bit of a high for the,
I think that's
the second half.
a nice way to end our sort of 2024 review. I think
Yeah.
I'd look at players like Foden and Grealish, and players who you know can do better. And there's various reasons why they've not done it this season, but if they're all on form, City are so much better. And it's you want to see Oscar Bob back, you want to see Rodri back, but these players can do better, and they just need that run of games, confidence, form, fitness, everything to click. And maybe a new year will do them good. So yeah, thank you everybody for listening throughout the year. Have a good new year. We will be back after the West Ham game, maybe before the West Ham game, depending on our schedule. I'll again always lose track of days at this time of year, so looking forward to get back onto a normal schedule after that. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, leave some comments, and we will get around to answering any questions. And yeah, thank you for listening, and we will be back shortly on the Talking City podcast.